Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back again to Triggered AF, the podcast with Danny. Hey, girl.
Hey.
And Alicia. I am so glad to be with y'all this week. Listen, if you missed last week, I need you to go ahead after you listen to this episode because we got a powerhouse in the house. After you listen to this episode, definitely go back to last week because I promise you it's the gems for me. It will totally bless your soul. You need it because I needed it. I'm pretty sure you do too. So hop into there. Now listen, this week we have a woman who I have admired. I mean, for the last, I want to say 6.5, 7 years, a true powerhouse. I mean, just y'all gonna find out, but she is a creative powerhouse for good. I want to welcome Eunique Jones Gibson. Hey, girl.
Hey.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I am sleepy, but that is okay.
Like that.
It totally is. I want to thank you, of course, first of all, for so much just joining us in this episode. It is one that truly is near and dear to my heart, not because so many suffer from this affliction, but just because I like to hear the background of how folks have grown, what they've done, what it looks like, and just dive deep into that. So we ready?
Ready.
Yeah, let's go.
Lego. So this episode is called Validation is for Parking. And one of the things, especially now with social media being such a huge, thing in so many people's lives, one of the things that I always like to find out is why do you think so many people seek that external validation?
Yeah, I think that a lot of times people do it and don't realize they're doing it. It starts, now that I have kids, I just think back to my own childhood. And I think that a lot of things start from our youth and they're just not corrected real time. And I think that those habits and those practices develop into our adulthood. And I think that validation is one of those. It's the, did I do good? Mommy, look at me. Daddy, look at me. Right. And I think that those are fine. But I think as you grow and evolve and you become less self-absorbed and more confident and committed to what you're doing within your own self, I think it's easier to validate yourself. But I think it's one of those things where we have to teach our kids or start from a young age. So for instance, with my son, I don't say things like, don't wear that. Your people might talk about you. That's irrelevant. But those are things that we start internalizing as kids. And I think that it grows into our adulthood. And so I think that's why I think it starts young. I think it doesn't get corrected. And we just are trained to care about what other people think. We're trained to care about how other people feel. And I think that it takes a conscious, committed effort to detach ourselves from other people's opinions or other people's thoughts as it pertains to what we're doing or not doing.
Yeah, I for sure agree with that, especially with it starting in childhood, because so many of us are taught to care about our reputation, to care, and, it's little things like that do end up turning into like this need for validation. When it comes to things like, caring about your reputation and caring about the kind of impacts you make, do you feel like sometimes seeking that validation can be a good thing?
No.
Well, no, because some people would be like, oh, you need to, like I'm Jamaican, and in the Jamaican culture, how things look and what people think is like drilled into you. Yeah. Like I am in therapy today.
Yeah. I mean, I do think that being intentional about how you live and your reputation and your personal brand is important, but it's not important because of what other people will think. It's important because of what you think. It's
right. And that's where they miss it. That's like the missing piece.
Exactly. So because if you lived your life that way, you'll never be fully content and satisfied, because you won't always know how people feel, and you'll always seek the approval of others. And that's just not a good life. And I mean, we've all been there, but you have to realize it and detach yourself from that.
Yeah, because you'll literally be shape-shifting your whole life. And then every person has a different opinion as to what you should do in this circumstance or in this instance. So you just get exhausted because you're constantly shifting. Well, this one says I should turn to the left, but this one says I should turn to the right. So maybe if I turn, equidistant between the left and the right, then maybe I'll be okay. And how you're right. Like that's, you never can be content. You never can settle in because you never get to figure out, well, how does it work for me? What do I like best? What looks good for me? It's crazy because it truly is so easy to get caught up, in the opinion of others. But how did you learn to tune into your own voice, especially with how you're now, raising your children?
Yeah, I think it took for me to realize that I was marching to other people's beats. And how tiring and taxing and stressful and unfulfilled that was.
Yeah.
If I felt like I was doing well in an area, but someone else who I had given power to, or a community that I had given power to, felt otherwise, it would mess up my mood, mess up, how I viewed myself. And I had to really see that for myself. And it wasn't always the case. I would say for me, a big turning point in my life was when I got pregnant with my daughter, Sage, and she's only 5. But Sage allowed me to slow down and truly realize why I was doing what I was doing, who I was doing it for. She allowed me to take the time, because a lot of times we just get caught up in the hustle of hustling. And when you do that, you get caught up in the hustle of hustling, sometimes thoughts and opinions and voices can enter your space. And if you are so busily focusing on the grind, sometimes you might not be doing a great job at filtering those voices in and out. And so that's how I think you get in the space where you can just be doing things that you might not want to be doing, or you can feel unfulfilled because you are too focused or fixated on how someone else views what you're doing, or how society says you should be doing because you're over 30 or a certain age. And so for me, it really just took me to slow down and realize what voices I had in my village, what voices I had in my circle, and that the voice that really mattered the most and the opinion that really mattered the most was mine.
First of all, you just said a whole lot in there that was so good. And the one thing that stood out to me was the voices and the communities that you gave power to that caused you to stop listening to your own. That right there is like, who are you giving your power to? Nobody can make you feel less than unless you give them the power to.
Yeah. And going back to what you were saying before about childhood and how a lot of these things start in your childhood, that is a very important component of why we seek validation, is being literally taught to give our power away, and taught, like, so many children don't feel seen, don't feel heard. I mean, hell, we even say children should be seen and not heard. And it's like this idea that because you're young, you always, and not saying that children don't need guidance and they don't need direction and things like that, but I've been learning through my own new journey as a mother how much my child has to teach me, and how you're talking about your daughter, like teaching you how to slow down and showing you things. It's like if we could sometimes feel that empowerment from our parents as children, and feeling that need, and not feeling the need to seek that validation outside of ourselves all the time, even from children. I just wonder sometimes, like, how that would play out for some of us, because I know for me, I don't really know a world in my life where like, even today, like if I call my mom and I say I want to do something, the first thing that she's going to talk about is how it's going to look, how it's going to come off. If I say, oh, I don't feel like hosting Christmas this year, it's going to be like, well, what about this? And what about what everybody thinks? And it's just like, well, what about the fact that I just don't want to? I just had a baby. I just moved. There's so much going on, but it's like we are so taught that what is going on with us is never as important as everybody else, especially as women, especially as mothers. And that for me is a really delicate balance that I'm trying to strike that is just not happening at the moment. But I'm hoping after this conversation, since Eunique is dropping all the gems, that it will help me, because it's definitely a struggle for me, for sure.
Yeah. And the thing is like the unlearning process takes so much more effort than the learning part.
Yes.
Because it's done so early. So for me, one of the things, which is why I like talking about, what was the backstory? How did you start? What did it look like? And for you, Eunique, as a creative, like Powerhouse for Good, which by the way, I adore. Not only are you the founder and publisher of Because of Them We Can, and the CEO of one of my favorite games, Culture Tags, what did starting look like for you? Because so many times we see the glory and all the awards and all the things, but we don't understand the work that went into building such a strong foundation. So what was starting for you? What did that look like?
Starting my my business.
I mean, honestly, I know you didn't mean to start a movement, but starting the movement, starting Because of Them You Can, then moving on to Culture Tags.
Yeah, I think starting began with, you always identify the need, right? So for me, starting began with seeing the need in my own home and feeling like perhaps some other people felt this way too. And starting meant not having it all thought out, not having a plan, not having a 5-year plan, not having a budget baked. It just started from a very genuine, I want to do this and I hope it resonates. That was the space that it started from back in 2013 when I launched. It was Because of Them We Can as a photo campaign for just Black History Month. I think, and I think that if we get out of our own way, we can all start. I think the reason why I'm still here is because I've managed to not just start, but I've managed to learn how to push and pivot too. And I think that had I not learned how to do that, I would still be taking photos of kids dressed as trailblazers. Not that those aren't necessary and those are inspiring and needed, but it had to evolve. And in order for that evolution to happen, I had to push. I had to push a little bit on my fears. I had to push a little bit on my comfort. I had to push a little bit on the sacrifices that I was willing to make. I had to push back on people who tried to keep me in a specific box as a photographer, when photography for me was a means to an end, when I was working a 9-to-5 job. So I had to learn how to push and push to see what else could there be. Is there an appetite for news and content that focuses on the very best of who we are, no matter if we are famous or not? Is there a push? Can I push to show people that you don't have to be a celebrity to be celebrated? Can I push on those things? And then from a pivot perspective, well, I've identified that my sweet spot, my purpose, my gift is to operate in this space of culture and community. And so is there a pivot to be had where I can expand beyond the confines of what I'm creating with Because Then We Can and do some other things that are still very culturally relevant, but maybe not the same as I call it internally Botwick. Maybe it's not the same. And so that's where you get Culture Tags, because again, it starts from the need to see games or play games that are rooted in our culture versus loving and playing games that are that originate outside of our culture because that's all we have, or those are our only options. And so from that need came the development of Culture Tags. And right now I'm on those same pushes to see how can this grow, how can this expand, and it get bigger. So learn how to build it after you start.
And just with the word expansion, where is Culture Tags? Because, I know where I bought mine, but now where can the rest of us find Culture Tags? Because I'm telling you, that is such a fun game.
Thank you. So Culture Tags is available nationwide with full chain at Target stores. It's also available in Walmart stores and Barnes and Noble and Books A Million and Myers. It's also at Amazon. And beginning of next year, it'll also be in Fred Meyer stores and Kroger's.
Listen, it's the and for me. It's the and, and the and. I truly, truly I like watching things grow. I think in my past life, I had to be a farmer or something because watching things grow just does it for me. It truly, truly does.
Yeah, that's incredible. I like what you were saying around the pivot, because we love to talk about a good pivot on this show. We talk about pivot. I always commend Alicia for just her ability to pivot in so many different ways in her arena. So I just love hearing people talk about the pivot. And I think a lot of us through this pandemic have had to learn how to pivot. So many people who lost their jobs, so many people who couldn't go back to work for various reasons. It's like, okay, now what do I do? And it's forced people into this uncomfortable space of having to figure out, okay, how do I figure this out, and how do I move forward, and how do I push? So I love when you talk about pivoting and pushing, because it's definitely been a hard lesson for some of us that we probably didn't know we needed. And you do that. But I think for some of us, that's not even something that we even felt like we knew how to do. And whenever you are pushing and you're pivoting, of course, you're going to have these critics and you're going to have people saying this and saying that. How do you feel like you differentiate between the value of a critic and then the BS of just empty noise and people just trying to get into your head when you're pushing and pivoting? Because that's normal to kind of come into those spaces because you're trying to kind of break out of a mold.
Yeah. For me, I think back and I apply something that I learned growing up from my father. Whenever there would be someone who would be critical or giving feedback or advice or a grade on a paper or comments, I think it applies to everything. He would say, chew up the meat, spit out the bones.
Oh, yes.
And I live by that.
Yes, I love that.
I'm very careful about what I consume, whether that's, the opinions of others, reading comments. I don't do that often. I'll do it here and there, but I like to apply the practice of chewing up the meat and spitting out the bones. A lot of times there may be one or two things that I can take away from some criticism, from some constructive criticism or criticism in general. But I chew up the meat and try to see, like, is there something that I can learn from this? Is there some validity in what this person is saying? But I also do not internalize it. And I think that's what's important. I don't internalize it. And even if it's meant to be personal, I don't take it personal. And that's been a practice, not taking it personal, because oftentimes when you're in a space like I am and you put your work into the universe to be consumed, you're going to have people, everyone's going to have an opinion. And some people are going to be so bold to send you emails or DMs and comments and things like that to let you know what their opinion is. And everyone won't always appreciate your perspective, know it, or care about it. And so I'm very careful to filter things. I do have a village that has a lot of weight. And so if there is someone in my village that I go to or that comes to me and gives me some advice or some pushback or some feedback, I take that to heart all the time, because I know that their intentions are right. And I know that they mean well for me.
Yeah.
But that's not the case with everyone else. So I think, you got to chew up the meat, spit out the bones, figure out what you can take away, spit everything else out.
I love that. Ooh, that's not going to be one of my new mantras. Chew up the meat, spit out the bones, because swallowing bones, you can cut yourself, you can choke.
Kill yourself.
You literally can, because it could split some stuff open, and it cause you to not be able to continue on this side of the Jordan River. So no, that for me, that's so dope. Listen, that's a tweetable. So if y'all not already, go ahead and tweet that one out, tag her so you know it's real. But no, so for me, especially with the chewing of the meat, I firmly, and spitting out the bones, because we got to say the whole quote. I truly believe that everything that you learn can be a transferable skill. Like there truly is no time lost, because whatever I learned doing this, I can apply in some way, some form, in the pivot, especially because that's been the theme. And not because we wanted it to be the theme, but because it was required. So how can we, or how would you suggest leveraging the things that we feel like aren't applicable when we are like shifting, pivoting, and expanding into like new territories, businesses, lanes? Because going from being a photographer to then creating a game that's now in, I think you named 7 or 8 stores, or will be in 7 or 8 stores by, Q1 2022. Those are different lanes, totally different lanes. Like, how did you leverage, and how would you suggest we do so when it comes to like using like transferable skills?
Yeah, I think it all works together. So I was only able to do photography because as a young person, I gained an appreciation for the arts, and for performing and for storytelling. And that has always been my career path. I came out of Bowie State University, a Bowie, as a communications major, and started working in online advertising and marketing with Microsoft. Photography was just another outlet on the weekends outside of the advertising world for me to be involved in. But everything that I learned, whether it's dealing with people, managing expectations, learning how to convey my thoughts, bring a vision to life, be imaginative and reimagine things, whether that was through photography or through my 9 to 5, it all goes into the pot. And some ingredients when you're cooking, and I'm no real chef, but I know enough to know that but sometimes things go into the pot and you can't taste it. You can't taste it. You don't know if it's there or not. But then there are some other things that go into the pot that are very strong and very dominant once you have that completed dish, and it becomes very obvious that is in the mix. And so everything goes into the pot, and you might not see how it works out for your good or how it's allowing you to do what you do, but it's in the dish. It's a part of the meal. And I think that with everything that we experience, everything that I don't think anything is wasted. I don't think any experience is wasted. I was talking to one of my mentors, called my OG, and he was talking about a period in my life that I shared with him while I was running Because Then We Can. That was just very interesting, and I'll just leave it at that. And he said it didn't feel good. It was like nasty medicine, but it worked for your good. And that's just how I look at some things. Like, everything won't feel good, but what you learn in the process might help you 3 years from now, 3 months from now, 3 weeks from now. And so I find myself sitting at tables and in conference calls or in rooms where I know I would not be able to contend, compete, or even sustain myself in those predicaments or positions had it not been for other experiences that at the time I was like, this is for the birds. And so it all goes into the pot. Every last bit of it goes into the pot, and it's just up to you to be able to identify. It's like when you match, as a kid, you play those matching games. Oh, this is matching with this. Once you get into your rhythm and your flow, you'll be able to start matching where you are versus now versus where you were, and how that experience enables you to do what you're doing.
Again, all the gems. I mean, and I'm not normally rendered speechless because I've been talking since literally I could talk. I was a kid who used to get in trouble, like sending notes home. Alicia just won't shut up. But with what you were saying, like everything goes into the pot, and it not feeling good, but it being for your good. Because you, in order to make, in my opinion, in order to make 1 million, you first need to get real good at making 100,000. And in order to make 100,000, you need to get real good at making a couple 10,000s. So the lessons that you learned when making 10,000, you'll need that to make the 100. You'll need the lessons you learned at the 100 to be able to make the 1 million, so on and so forth. So when you were talking about the lessons, right, that you need, or the nasty tasting, medicine that might not taste good, but it's good for you. What keeps you in the game when you're experiencing that for a longer period of time? Because there is no, like, you don't, yes, when you look back, it's 2020, but what happens when you're in it? Like, how tough. You deal with that part?
It's tough. But it's, one of the things that I've always said, no matter what I've gone through, and this came from understanding it as a young person, I always say, God got me. Like, I think you have to develop, whether it's, it doesn't have to be, you don't say God got me. You could say, I see the light. It's close. Whatever it is that you want to hold on to, right? You have to have that one definitive, positive statement that declares better, because you will have those situations that will have you convinced that, like, you know what? I'm not sure anymore. Or this doesn't feel good, doesn't feel right. And I think that while you're trying to figure out where you go from where you are, you have to have a statement that anchors you. That's why I have this, like, anchor. Like, you have to have something that has you anchored. And for me, it has always been, God got me. Because I'm like, you're not about to let me be out in these streets crazy. Like, at the end of the day, I know that better is coming. I would say to my husband, I feel like we're close. If I couldn't say God got me, I would say, I feel like we're close. What in the world we were close to, I never identified. I never said. I never knew. Like, I knew it was positive. I knew it was better than what we were currently going through. And so I would just say, I feel like we're close. I feel like we're close. I would always say that. And if I had moved beyond, I feel like we're close, I said, God got me. And so I think you in the moment, you have to have, it's like when you're dating. I'm married. I've been married 13 years.
Okay, to the longevity.
Okay, to the longevity. But I remember before I got married, I call her, she's my mom, Pam. She's my spiritual mom. I remember her saying, write down all the reasons why you are marrying your husband. Write down all the reasons or that you love him, or why you love him, or what makes you love him. Because there will be days where you will need to look back at that list to really ground and center yourself. And I think it's the same thing when we go through things. You have to know your whys. You have to know what you're looking towards, what you're aiming for. And you have to be able to reflect on something in the moment that allows you to see beyond how it feels in that space at that time.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, that's just so powerful. It's literally something that I want to emphasize this part, to go back on having those anchor statements and having that anchor. That is so important. Alicia, what do you feel like yours are? Like, she named her two, her God's got me, and I know we're close. I don't know what we're close to, but we're close. We're close.
Like, what are we close to? Something.
I want all of our listeners and everybody that comes across this podcast to find those anchors and to find those statements that will help pull you through those tough moments beyond your feelings. Alicia, I know what mine are, but first I want to know yours, Alicia. What would you say, like, your couple statements? And you can have a bunch, but what are just the main ones that come up when you're in those moments and you want to, like, pull through?
I think for me, I'm a firm believer in God. I don't do religion, but I absolutely believe in God. And so for me, it's always, you didn't bring me this far to leave me. Like, you're not about to leave me. And I'm a believer that he sent the universe to be in support of whatever it is that I've decided. So I always will lean back on, okay, I made a decision. And in my belief system, that once I've made a decision, the support comes. I just have to start. And so I was dealing with some major like mental issues this week because I'm going through so many transitions at once. So many people are getting sick. Their hearts are giving out, from a stroke from my grandmother last Friday to heart surgery with my mother in a couple of weeks. So it's been a lot. And so for me, I just keep telling myself, you just have to start. Because the moment that you start, again, my belief system, I believe that God sends the universe to aid in support of whatever it is that you want to do. So for me, it's just start. And you didn't bring me this far to leave me. So those are the two primaries for me.
Yeah, it's important that it's anchored in something higher than yourself, because if you're thinking that you're the source and you're going to pull you through that, you're probably not going to get very far. And I think we all learned that the hard way, when we feel like we could just lean on our own understanding, or we're just going to figure it out without any kind of support from something greater than us. Mine is always, it's not happening to me, it's happening for me. And it also ties into a higher power of just believing that everything works together for my good. So I always have to just remind myself, like, okay, this is happening and it feels like an attack and it feels like this and it feels like that. But I know that it's happening for me in some way. I know that my soul is going to learn something. I believe our souls are sent here to learn a lot of things, and each of us have different lessons we're supposed to learn along the way. I like to not repeat the lessons. So I try to take as much in those moments, like, okay, what am I supposed to learn? And my second one is, what am I supposed to learn from this? Because I truly believe, like I said, in not repeating lessons if I can avoid it. I like to pass the test the first time out. I don't always do that, but I think just being conscious in those moments of that there is a reason for this to happen, as opposed to just kind of being on autopilot and going through things and going through the motions. I like to sit in it and be like, okay, this is happening, that's happening. What can I grab from it and pull from it that's going to help me elevate and help me kind of connect to my highest self as much as possible.
I love that. I love that. I love that. And for me, especially with the, what am I supposed to learn from this? I think if we can all get into the habit of shifting, like, okay, this really is not happening to me, it's happening for me. It will produce, from it, like the nasty mess you were talking about.
Yeah, because it's about I mean, we all just pretty much said it's all about perspective. Yeah. It's all about how you're looking at the picture. It's all about what you're deciding is going to be the impact, or, it's like we have so much power in our decision making when we're going through things. And a lot of times we just give it up to our emotions. Our emotions tend to just take over and take us for a ride, when they're important because they are great ways to identify what's happening and how we're feeling through it. But I think sometimes if we would just use our emotions more so as guides, as opposed to being flooded with them and making irrational decisions through our emotions, those are things that I definitely hope a lot of people can start to kind of grab as tools and learn and seek out the help to figure out how to regulate our nervous systems, how to figure out ways to move through the things that we feel like we're going through in a way that could really benefit us at the end.
Yeah.
Listen, amen. Okay. I'm going to pass the collection plate to you both. But now, as we are, finalizing, I do want to ask a question about noise, right? Success makes a lot of it. And truly, you have been successful in just your ability to tell stories, to connect into the best parts of our culture and build a community around it. But sometimes that noise can be scary as fuck, especially because I know you didn't necessarily intend to create the movement that you created. So how have you managed like the demands that come with the noisy part of success, especially while building your family?
That's a great question. How have I managed the demands? In the beginning, it was tough because I felt like I was on a treadmill where I did not control the speed or the pace. but I was on the treadmill. And if you ran on the treadmill, you got to go.
That sounds scary. I just want to
run. And then I think back to what I was saying earlier, I started to slow down. I started to adjust the pace, right? I was running because somebody else's fingers were on them things. We're inclining it. And I felt like this was necessary, right? This was necessary. It's just like if you're trying to lose weight, I have to go through this. And I think that's bull sometimes. We teach people that you have to struggle, you have to lose to appreciate what you have. Like you have to go through the fire to come out. Like you don't always have, like you can stop, right? You can determine a better way. Yeah. You can decide what is the best way to get to where you need to go. Not to say that you get to decide your challenges, but you get to decide how you will approach them, right? And so for me, I felt like in the beginning, whether it was from exterior pressure from people in the community who just wanted more and more and more, or whether it was from individuals who were in my circle who were not good for me, I was running on a treadmill where I did not control the pace. And the pace was always fast. And then I began to notice that, and I took control over the treadmill, and I began to adjust the speed and the incline, to make it make sense for me. Didn't change the destination, right? It didn't change the goal, but it changed the approach to make it more sustainable and to make it more enjoyable and to make it healthier for me. And I think that's important, that we control our pace, we control our output, and that we work diligently to ensure that it is healthy for us. No one else knows your capacity. No one else truly knows your abilities. No one else truly knows your breaking points. And so if you have given power to individuals to control the speed at which you run, you can kill yourself because those people just don't know. And so, and whether that is physically, emotionally, or mentally, it will break. And so, for me, it really took for me to understand that there was a better way, and that, you know, it's like I told my son now that we're in this pandemic, and he'll say, you know, I didn't get a good grade, didn't do a good job on this, but I tried, I just couldn't get through it. And I say, you know what? It is what it is. Like, you know, you just have to say, like, at the end of the day, am I doing my best with what I have? Is it reasonable? Because we can be unreasonable in our expectations of ourselves, the expectations of our output. And because we are who we are as a community, as a people, as Black folks in America, we will always acquiesce and meet the challenge. But is it always in our best interest when we talk about holistically? And so I had to shift the pace, and I had to be okay with not meeting everyone else's expectations. Like at the end of the day, it was about my expectations of myself, what I desire to do, which is to make God smile. And if I felt like I was checking those boxes, and if the KPIs that really matter to me, my children and what my husband thinks, if those things were okay, then I was okay.
So first of all, you had me at KPIs and then making God smile, like that for me, literally, I say all the time, like, you know, I want to die empty. I want to take all the gifts and talents that were given to me, and I want to use them up so good that when it's time for me to go, I can't do nothing but smile, because I know, like, I've done all the things at my own pace, according to how I wanted to do it, according to what I felt was, you know, my purpose in life. So to hear you say, just adjust the pace, like you can still run your own race, but adjust the pace, because if someone else is managing it, they really can kill you, because they don't know when you've reached your maximum and then you've fallen out, not because you're not committed, not because it's not still a major part of your purpose, but because you didn't identify within yourself, hey, this works for me. but running 10 miles a day does not. I can still run, but instead of running 10 miles, I'm going to run 3. I'll still get there, and it'll be there with my whole self. Not that I finally get to the finish line and I'm about to die because it was too much.
Right. And I think that also goes back to what I said, the bad medicine, or the medicine that does good but tastes nasty.
Yeah.
I still don't despise those days, right? And so when we talk about everything working for our good, I can run laps around certain things because of that time period, right? Like I can adjust my speed, and I know my capacity, but I also know my breaking points because of those time periods. And so before I get to that space where my whole life is unraveling, I know how to pump those brakes because of those times. So yeah, I just wanted to say that, to connect it, because again, nothing is lost.
Yeah, there's definitely what we say, like there's a blessing in every lesson. And I love that idea of reminding yourself and connecting those dots, because we don't do that enough, and give ourselves the credit for going through those things and then being like, okay, how can I use that experience to benefit me and turn that maybe negative, or what we would consider negative in that moment, into a positive by using the skills that we acquired going through that to help move forward and push through the things that we're trying to do now. So I love that idea of, and I like how you phrase it, of kind of connecting those dots back and being like, okay, right, that wasn't, it tasted bad, but look at the benefits and look at all the things that I've been able to gain from those experiences. And if you're, and I have a relative that's always talking about, when we were kids, she would always say, why do you girls always want to go through it yourselves? I've already been through it. And I would always, and getting older, I understood that protectiveness that she felt over us as a matriarch in our family. Like, oh, why do you have to experience it? My sister would always be like, I have to experience it for myself. And, me kind of being the younger person, I would always kind of look at both perspectives. And I obviously ended up siding with my sister of wanting to experience it myself, but also taking the things that maybe she would teach us and the things that I experienced and putting them together. So I love that idea of putting everything in the pot and mixing it all up. And it could be some of the great criticism or feedback from the people in your village who really matter. It could be the things that you experience, good and bad, so it's just, that is life. Like, that is what life is all about. That's what living is all about. It's throwing everything in the pot like a jambalaya and using it and enjoying it and just taking everything for what it is and not letting anything go to waste. All those things really resonate with me, because I think we tend to disregard and discredit things that we feel aren't good, when really, when you throw them all together, it's really what makes you amazing and unique.
So a lot of what you guys were talking about is pattern matching, right? And it's what we teach little kids when they're like, in primary school, figuring things out. And Eunique, you said it, you were saying, because you've gone through those tougher things, you now know when you're reaching burnout. And I think that there is a piece that we tend to ignore, not only just being a woman, but especially being a woman of color, because we do acquiesce. We will show up. We will show up in excellence, and sometimes to our own detriment. So being able to pattern match, to say, okay, these are the things that happen when I'm reaching my breaking point. This is what I'm going to do to ensure that once I've hit this point, that I now, what is the next choice? What am I going to do differently? Because am I doing this because it's something I want to do, or am I doing it because the validation that I'll receive from others? Tony Jones has a song where she says it's called the new worth ethic instead of worth. And in it, she says, there's a line in the song that says, the wins from, Team No Sleep are bossy, but I'm not doing that anymore. So yes, the wins are bossy. The awards are beautiful. But if you look at it and realize that you're doing it for the validation of someone else, then it is time to go ahead and change and shift. Listen, this whole conversation was phenomenal. So Eunique, I want to know, how do we stay connected? Where do we go? All the things. I want to know all of them.
Yeah. So you can follow me on Twitter at Eunique, EUNIQUE, or on Instagram at UniqueJG. And then you can also follow Because of Them at Because of Them on Instagram and Twitter. And you can follow Culture Tags at Culture Tags on Instagram and Twitter.
Well, thank you so much, Eunique. This was an awesome conversation, something I needed. You dropped so many gems in my spirit for me to take home and use. So I appreciate it. And I hope all of our listeners and everyone watching this really feels as full as we do from this conversation. It was so powerful and so well needed and so right on time. That I think that it'll definitely have the impact that I think it will. So thank you so much for coming, Eunique. We appreciate your time. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Of course, you can stay connected with me at Danny Foster Coaching on Instagram. With Alicia, you can stay connected with her on Instagram at Alicia Reese. And I think it's the same on Facebook and Twitter and everything, right? At Alicia Reese. So stay connected with us at TriggeredAF PC on Instagram, TriggeredAF Podcast. On Facebook, TriggeredAFpodcast.com, all the things. Just let's stay connected because we're going through our triggers together and trying to figure this life thing out. So thank you guys and bye. Thanks so much for listening to this week's episode of Triggered AF. Remember, don't be consumed by your triggers. Confront it and then work to release it. Whether you leave us more triggered than you came or you're feeling like you've been open to a new perspective, our hope is that you've grown. Make sure to share this episode with a friend who's trigger happy and tag us while you're listening. We can't wait to hear from you. Until next week, pull it together, girl.